So as much as I love podiums, I prefer to use a handheld mic so I can see all of you a little bit better. And believe me, I love podiums. So my name's Adela Cojab. My dad's family is originally from Aleppo in Syria. They left in the 1920s and made their way to Mexico, where my grandfather was born and my father was born. My mom's side of her family are from Damascus and from Beirut, and they didn't leave the Middle East until the 70s. They went by way of Canada to Mexico, then settled really wherever they could. A large portion of my family in Brazil, but I also have family in Monaco, in London, and in Montreal. Now, I consider myself a citizen of the world. I was born in Mexico, and like all Syrian Jews, I made my way to Deal, New Jersey. I grew up in Deal, where Syrian Judaism was always the biggest part of my life, and of course, Zionism was a big part of my Judaism. I always heard about antisemitism on college campuses, but I never thought it would be something I would face. Now, I could tell you about my family's immigration story, but we're going to have three amazing panelists that can tell you their stories themselves. And I'm here to talk about the next generation. So what's been going on with the next generation of Sephardic Jews? When I first showed up to NYU, it was a really great campus for Jewish students. I was involved in almost everything. I had a radio show at WNYU Radio. I was, of course, in student government. I was in Greek life. I was on my hall council. And it was a wonderful place back in 2015. But in 2018, suddenly everything changed. And everything turned to Israel-Palestine on campus. And it all started with the mention of Zionism in the same category as racism and Nazism, of all things. And the Jewish community, when we saw this, came together, wrote a statement, not angry, but disappointed that our fellow students couldn't understand why that was so offensive to the Jewish community. And I was told by a mentor of mine not to publish. Why? Because he said, "Are you sure you want to start a campus war?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, we even read the statement. If you draw attention to it, we'll make it bigger. If you ignore it, I promise it'll go away." And I made the executive decision to ignore it, thinking that he was right. Until this day, it's my biggest regret, because no, we didn't publish a statement, but 3 weeks after, we had a boycott of NYU student government against NYU's Tel Aviv campus. 2 weeks after that, we had a boycott of 70 professors against Israeli academics. And 2 weeks after that, we had a boycott by 53 groups against not only the state of Israel, but Realize Israel, a group that I was president of. And over those 3 months, NYU became one of the most anti-Semitic campuses in the United States. All because I was told that if I ignored it, it would go away. And if I stood up for myself, I would make a problem maker. Now, it all culminated in Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, after I went to school week after week after week to tell them that there was an issue on college campuses, for them to tell me I was overreacting. And for Yom HaAtzmaut, we showed up in the way the event kicked off was with an anti-Israel student lighting an Israeli flag on fire, throwing it on the ground, and letting it burn. Later, another student came to the center of the Hatikva circle, where we were wrapped in Israeli flags, grabbed the microphone from a Jewish student, started yelling, "Free, free Palestine." At that point, we looked up. They had taken our other Israeli flags, tore them to shreds, and hung them from trees on lampposts. And YPP stepped in and made 2 arrests. I went to the school and I said, "Has the line been crossed?" And the school said, sure, that they would take action. And instead of doing anything about it, they actually gave an award to the group that spent 2 years harassing the Jewish community. Now, I'm going to make a very long story short. But after I tried to get in touch with the school again, I was told I was overreacting. And I started thinking, what can I do? Mainly thinking about the burning of the Israeli flag on NYU's campus. And I realized that it's the only flag you can burn, and not only is it not alarming, but you'll receive an award. Because NYU understood in that moment that the way that you become an award-winning group is you pick a minority community, you boycott their members, you assault their members, you boycott their events, protest their events, you burn their flag, get arrested for it, and you will win an award so long as that group is Jewish. I don't know what to do. So I got in touch with lawyers, and I asked if I had a case against the school. The lawyers made it clear that I did not. Unfortunately, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act at the time didn't include religious protections. It only protected nationality, ethnicity, and race. So I was told, unfortunately, you don't have a case. When I sent them the documents I had, they called me back and told me that my case could become the foot in the door to change the way that Title VI applies to Jewish students. And they told me, you're not going to win, that this case can make a difference. And I called my mom, and I said, I'm suing NYU for anti-Semitism. Now, I did sue NYU for anti-Semitism, and my case did make it to the White House. I got a call from President Trump from his first term, and he invited me to speak with him at a conference in Miami, which I did, called me up to the presidential podium, and I spoke about my case. 3 days later, he signed the executive order on anti-Semitism, officially applying Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to anti-Semitism. Now, why am I telling you this? Because when I sued NYU in 2019, that was before October 7th. And after October 7th, we saw every single campus explode in anti-Semitism. And when I spoke to people, they said, "Can you believe this is happening?" And I said, absolutely. Because I've seen it happen before, year after year after year. And this is not something new. This is something that has been happening cyclically to the Jewish community for generations. Now, there's multiple types of anti-Semitism. There is anti-Semitism of extermination, which is what we saw in the Holocaust, where you decided that Jews did not exist. But there's also the form of anti-Semitism where you boil up the temperature so much that it becomes impossible to exist as a Jew. And unfortunately, that sort of anti-Semitism has not been recognized because it's harder to spot. And it's what's been happening on college campuses because of the same reasons that our families left the Middle East, because of religious extremism. Now, as much as we'd like to think that anti-Semitism is special, this form of extremism is what drove our families out, and it's no longer contained to the Middle East. So when we have an event talking about the next generation, we as Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are situated in a special position where we have seen extremism at its peak. And it's not only our responsibility to the Jewish people to stand up in the face of it, but our responsibility to the West and to the countries that we now call home. Now with that, I do want to set the stage for the following panel. I'm going to turn it back to Jason, who will introduce our panelists, and I want you to have that kind of framework when we hop back into this. Thank you.